Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Chainsaw Reacts podcast, episode number 46. And today, guys, we are covering one topic and one topic only, and that is my spoiler review slash discussion for Captain America Civil War. That is your warning. If you haven't seen this film, click away now. Do not listen to this podcast. This podcast is filled with spoilers for Captain America Civil War. And also, do not check the description of this podcast. Do not check the description of this video because I will have time starts for everything I'm covering in this podcast. If you want to skip to a particular topic, the descriptions will also have particular spoilers as well. So please do not click in the description of this video. Click away if you haven't seen the film. If you have seen the film, then you're here. Sit back, relax, and let's talk spoilers for Captain America Civil War. Last warning, we're getting into spoilers, okay? Are you gone? You better be, because we're getting into spoilers right now. Okay, let's jump to the first topic, which I didn't cover in my spoiler-free review for this film, which is Helmut Zemo, the villain for the film. Now, a lot of people who have seen the film, that love the film or think it's okay or whatever, a lot of people will be saying in their reviews or just talking about the film in general is that a villain wasn't really needed for this film. And I kind of agree to an extent. And that's why I really didn't talk about him much in my spoiler free review for two reasons. Number one, he wasn't really a huge part of this film to basically the end, which is a huge spoiler. And that's also why I didn't cover him in my non spoiler review, because talking about Helmut Zemo and what he does in this film goes into really big spoiler territory, which we'll be covering one of the things he basically brings out into fruition towards the end of the film. Well, that's actually a particular topic. I'll be getting to it a little bit, but I felt like when you first got introduced to him, I felt that at first I'm like, okay, he's really stuck on this particular date, which is very important later, but over the course of time, when he keeps popping back up, when he first pops up, going after a particular soldier who was a part of Hydra back in the 90s during this whole scene, which basically plays out towards the end. We keep going back to this particular thing, and it's a very central part of this story, but at first it just seems really random. But when he gets into the base where they finally catch Bucky, and he's pretending to be this a psychiatric doctor or whatever, and he basically unleashes the Winter Soldier and puts him back into Winter Soldier mode, being he basically where he can be controlled. Then you get to see a little bit more of what his intentions are. And overall, I felt like his plan to basically pit two giant forces against each other, Captain America and Iron Man. Now, there was always tension between the two characters, but what Helmut Zemo did was kind of enhance it, and especially the end is when it really got enhanced when the big reveal happened that Bucky, aka the Winter Soldier, being controlled by Hydra, was the one that killed Tony Stark's parents, which I'll get to a little bit later. But I felt like with this huge reveal at the end of the movie, that Helmut Zemo's plan wasn't necessarily to destroy everything or cause harm to cities. He was on a revenge warpath. He was on a warpath to he could easily have done the most villainous thing, which is I'm going to kill the Avengers. I'm going to kill these people. But yet he's like, I got a better idea. Instead of me dirtying my hands, why don't I just he dirties his hands in the film, but instead of him going against these characters, why don't I pit them against each other with something that, one of the characters doesn't know and the other one does know, and we're going to put them together, and it all seemed to work. Now, people have argued that he's wasteless and he's not worth anything, and that this could have easily happened without his appearance and without his, persuasion and what he does in the film. I feel like that if he wasn't in the film, they could have, obviously found other ways for Team Cap and Team Iron Man to fight each other. But I feel like that with what he did in the film, with how he impersonated the Winter Soldier with a particular thing, which we'll get to in the Black Panther section, and what he revealed at the end of the film, I felt like that since he was involved and since he was the one shown throughout the entire film kind of building up to this moment, the reveal of the death of Tony's parents, to Tony himself seeing Winter Soldier do it, I think that Helmut Zemo overall, it fit, and I felt like that it worked for the film. And since they didn't kill him, that there's more to what's going to be involved with this character. And he even said this at the end of the film. I think it was his last line of the film when he was talking to Everett Ross and basically saying, Um, did I? When the question was asked, your plan failed, or he didn't say did I. He says, did it? Like his plan technically succeeded because he was able to successfully, even though that Tony Stark and Iron Man, the same person, excuse me, Iron Man and Captain America were able to kind of settle their differences, and then the big reveal happened where they went at each other again, and Bucky included. That technically Helmut Zemo was able to separate the Avengers. He was able to disable the Avengers technically in this film. So we got to give him credit. I mean, obviously, yes, they could have not had a villain. They could have found other ways to make all this go down in a big way. But I feel like with what they did with this character and that they've talked about how they're going to possibly use him for more films, I think this is a great setup when we got to see his intentions and why he was doing it because of his family being murdered in Sokovia and seeing this reveal and all this kind of stuff, I felt for this character. Now, obviously he's a villain, but I felt for why he was doing it, and I think successfully as the film portrayed it, I think he did a pretty good job with what he was trying to do, which was pit the two teams against each other, pit the two titans of the Avengers against each other, and he successfully did it in a very cool way, and I like how it all tied up in that aspect. So Helmut Zemo to me wasn't a waste of a villain. But if he does not appear, let's say he never appears ever again in any Marvel film going forward, then I will look back and say, well, then maybe they should never have used him. But if they decide to go further and have him in, let's say, Black Panther, for instance, because that's all involved there, then I think that there'll be a good reason to keep, there was a good reason to introduce the character in this film if he appears in Black Panther or in Infinity War, either part one or part two, or however they're going to be titled at this point, because now they're rumored to be retitled. But I'm hoping that he does appear again so we can get more of his, maybe not so much his backstory, but more of, how he was able to come up with all this and how he was able to do this. And to see what this character will do moving forward, after successfully separating the Avengers in a sense. So, got to give them props for that. The second topic I do want to cover now, we'll get to right now, is Spider-Man. Now, I said in my non-spoiler review, and I'll say it here once again, then we'll get to some spoilery stuff. I felt like Tom Holland did a phenomenal job as Spider-Man in this film. I think that he did a great job as Peter Parker and also as Spider-Man. We got to see a really awesome scene between him and Tony Stark in his room, and that was just basically the kind of the fast introduction to Spider-Man, and you really didn't need an origin story. You really didn't need a lot of explanation. They did quick throwaway lines. Yeah, I've had these powers for 6 months, and Tony Stark's like, yeah, I've been following you. And he's got video footage of him swinging around in a really bad costume, which was funny, but when you really think about it, a kid his age who just got the abilities to become Spider-Man, his costume is not going to be to what we think it would look like, because even in the live action films and the animated cartoons and even in the animated TV shows and also the comic books, he got really cool spider outfits and he made them himself for the most part. So it just felt more organic and it felt more real to me as an audience member and a viewer and a lover of these films, that a kid that says in the film, I got these powers 6 months ago, and he makes this really awful suit. It just makes sense. And there's a good reason why they didn't show this in the trailer, because this would be very funny and laughable out of context to see this really crappy footage of, like, if they say they show like a clip from the actual film of showing Tony Stark looking at the footage, and you see this really crappy Spider-Man like in his outfit. You see it in the film and you see it in that footage. If they would have showed that in a trailer or a TV spot or something and it was clearly shown and everyone's like checking it out, they would laugh their asses off and say, oh my god, they ruined Spider-Man or whatever. That's horrible. But in context, you get it because you see his room. He's a dumpster diver. It just makes sense. He's not up to the capabilities that he can be and he will become later a Spider-Man, but for now he's just some teenager in high school trying to understand everything. He's still in high school. He's trying to be a hero. His mind is all over the place. So it's really going to be difficult for him to grasp what he can possibly do with his abilities and how to balance everything. So it makes sense to me on a personal level that he has this really crappy suit. Now, seeing the interaction between Tony Stark and Aunt May was pretty funny. He kept making references about his aunt and how she's really hot, and it's like you have a really attractive aunt and all that kind of stuff. and Tony Stark just playing it off like, you know that grant you signed up for? And Spider-Man's like, what are you talking about? Like, grant? He's like, you know, the one you applied for. Yeah, it got funded. And Aunt May's like, I can't believe this. And you know, Iron Man's really there to recruit Spider-Man, but he really played it off very well. It was really a great moment. And seeing the interaction between, like I was mentioning, Tony Stark and Peter Parker, seeing them both talk it out and all that kind of stuff. And basically, Tony Stark, hey, you've ever been to Germany? No. It's like, well, you want to come? He's like, I can't just leave. And then he's like, well, okay, well, I guess you can't leave. I guess go tell Aunt May. And he shoots the webbing and cuts Iron Man's hand on the door. It's like, don't tell Aunt May. And then he's like, all right, Spider-Man. He finally calls him Spider-Man after he kept saying, like, Spiderling, Spider-Boy. And he's like, Spider-Man. He's like, no, you're not Spider-Man. But it was a great scene. And now after seeing this film, well, before the film was released, they announced that Robert Downey Jr. is going to be in Spider-Man Homecoming, the first solo Spider-Man film. After seeing this film, and especially just seeing this first scene in my head after the scene finished, and we went onwards after that, I'm like, it makes sense why Tony Stark is going to be in the Spider-Man solo film, because they have a great relationship, and it even builds further in the airport scene, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes after we finish up with Black Panther. But seeing the new suit, we didn't get to see Tony Stark create the suit, but seeing him in the new suit, seeing Spider-Man going crazy and just going all over the place in the airport scene, which I'll be covering in a bit, was phenomenal. I mean, he was so good. Great lines. You saw his strength in this airport scene, and seeing him crawling like a spider and just being Spider-Man. It felt so good, and it felt so unreal that after all this time of us imagining and hoping that one day Spider-Man will go back to Marvel and he'll be in the MCU. The fact that it's happening, the fact that you can stop this podcast right now, you can go to the theater and get tickets for Captain America Civil War, and you will see Spider-Man in a Marvel Cinematic Universe film with not only Captain America, but Iron Man, and then the tons of other characters in this film. It's beautiful. It just works. And I cannot wait for the solo film. I can't wait to see what they do. I'm hoping that what they captured with Spider-Man, Peter Parker and Spider-Man in Civil War, I'm hoping that it transfers perfectly and it basically just continues down the great path they already built for Peter Parker and Spider-Man in the solo film, because I think they did a phenomenal job here, and I can't wait to see what they do next. And I'm hoping that Tony Stark has not a humongous role, but a pretty decent role in the Spider-Man Homecoming, where he basically can help train Spider-Man, because in the airport scene, you got to see that Spider-Man can hold his own against these Avengers. But he's just a teenager. He's still kind of having fun with it. I mean, he's obviously kicking ass. He basically kicked the crap out of Captain America. He went against Giant Man, which we'll get to at the airport scene. He basically just held his own against these characters, and especially against Falcon and Winter Soldier. That was a great little fight scene there with all three of those characters. So seeing what they did with Spider-Man here, the hype is real, guys. I don't care that people like the title Spider-Man Homecoming. I think it's kind of weird, but at the same time, once I did some more research, Homecoming is a comic book title for a Spider-Man comic book, and the fact that he's still a teenager in high school, and the fact that it could be taken as a kind of play on words that he's back home at Marvel, even though he's technically not. It's just a multi-deal with both companies, a merger deal for Spider-Man, if you will. But Tom Holland, fantastic job. Can't wait to see Spider-Man Homecoming, and hopefully his appearance in Infinity War Part 1 and 2. We'll see what happens there. Next thing I do want to cover is Black Panther. Chadwick Boseman did a phenomenal job with this character. Now, even before the film was released, just seeing the little itty bitty clips of him in trailers and TV spots, I knew I was going to like this character. I've always been interested and I've always liked the character Black Panther. I like where he's from. I like the cultural background of him. I like the look of him. I like the powers that he has. I just overall just enjoy everything about this character. It's a very unique character, and I'm glad that he was brought into the MCU. I mean, they could have easily brought him into Phase 1, but it would have been really different because they really didn't have a foundation for the MCU. So I'm glad that they waited a little bit to bring in the Black Panther, and oh boy, did they bring in Black Panther. This wasn't like A kind of version of Black Panther. No, to me, this is Black Panther. The moment you see him on screen, the moment he starts talking in the meeting where they're basically going to be signing the Sokovia Accords, which is, the papers to basically hold down the Avengers, you got the sense of his character and that he's very powerful. And then you see his father there, T'Chaka. I think that's his name, T'Chaka, and Black Panther's T'Challa. And I was kind of confused on what exactly Black Panther's motives are in this film because we weren't really sure if he was going to be affected by the Avengers in a certain way, or if it was going to be that he is getting into the mix because he hears about these Sokovia Accords. So he comes in and joins Iron Man's side and basically introduces himself. And that's not the way at all. They went a route that I didn't expect because I thought that they would have his father in the solo Black Panther film, and they won't unless the Black Panther film is set before the events of Civil War, which I doubt it because all these films are going chronological order at this point. So I don't see them going back further before Civil War and having the solo Black Panther film. Now they might have flashbacks, but I think the story mainly is just going to go forward. So they could have easily found a more simpler way to bring in Black Panther, the Sokovia Accords. Okay, he's coming in and he's going to just randomly show up at the Avengers, facility and just say I'm on Team Iron Man and I'm here. I'm a hero and I'm a hero in Wakanda and I'm here to basically agree with these accords. They found a very cool way, and that way, cool for us because it really you felt the more passion for the character. They killed off his father, and essentially it's basically Helmut Zemo once again. I had to think there for a second. Helmut Zemo is the one that actually blew up the assembly building or whatever building they were in, some government building, where T'Challa, Black Panther's father, was giving a speech, and this humongous bomb goes off, kills a lot of people in that room, and it said that, oh, Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, did it. When it turns out Helmut Zemo did it, but it was a very cool way to bring in Black Panther into full force because then you get to see his rage. You get to see his anger. His fighting style is beautiful. It's art. It is magical. Black Panther in this film, when he has the actual outfit on, it's scary. I'm like, oh my god, this guy is going to straight up wreck shit right now. And he does. He freaking does in this film. There's one particular moment in the airport scene that I do want to cover because it's Black Panther heavy and it is just fantastic. It's very quick. There's a moment where Captain America gets behind Black Panther and throws him, and Black Panther does a flip, and he goes, "Move, Captain. I won't tell you a second time." And Black Panther launches in the air and spins his body and does 3 kicks like bam, bam, bam. So freaking fast against Cap's shield as he holds it up. Black Panther's in the air, 3 kicks spinning, bam, bam, bam. And he lands. I'm like, oh my god. And it's so freaking fast. And at that moment, while I was watching the film in the theater, me and my friend I have 2 friends who I saw the film with, Carson and Thomas. My friend Thomas is sitting on my left. And at the moment that Black Panther does this 3 spin kick as fast as he can, it is beautifully done. And it's so amazing. I freaking threw my hands in the air, and so did my friend Thomas, who's holding a bowl of popcorn. We're like, yes, yes, because it was so freaking amazing. Because we get to see the power for a brief second, the true power of the Black Panther in that moment. He has great fighting, fighting scenes in this film against obviously the Winter Soldier once, twice in this film, and he goes against a couple other characters in the airport scene. But seeing that 3-spin kick, it just always comes back to me. It always just is a moment that stands out because he's in the air and he is showing his power, and it's beautiful. So I gotta give it to Chadwick Boseman. Him portraying T'Challa in a very, very sometimes calm, but you get to feel the anger and the rage inside of him. But he's still on his face. You kind of see the anger, but he's playing it as he's calm because he's controlling his emotions, but he knows his mission. And so instead of him, he is on Team Iron Man's side, but his agenda is to kill the Winter Soldier until he learns later that, of course, that Helmut Zemo was the one that framed the Winter Soldier, and it was actually Helmut Zemo that killed his father. Black Panther's agenda was like, sure, I'll be on your team, Iron Man. I'm only on your team to go after Winter Soldier. that is my mission. And he just goes after Winter Soldier and obviously has to fight other people, but Black Panther was beautifully done in this film, and I cannot wait to see the actual Black Panther solo film to see where his story continues after this. Now, obviously, we have a section that we're going to come up with a little bit later in this podcast, the mid-credit scene, which he is featured in, but I'll talk about that when we get to that actual section. But Black Panther was phenomenally done in this film. I think that there was just so much they could have. There was so much they did for this character easily. Like they brought in his origin. They basically set up that he was going to be the king of Wakanda now. Now he is, and I'm really curious to know where they take his character after this, because I feel like that his character went through a very crazy journey, because he started off revenge is the way. I'm going to avenge my father's death, and he ends the film not killing the man who killed his father. And what they showed in the mid-credit scene really stands out to me, but I'm really curious to know if they're going to bring in, God, what's his name? I'm blanking on the villain's name who was featured briefly in Age of Ultron. But they might bring him in. He was played by, oh my gosh, now I'm blanking on the guy's name who portrayed the villain in Age of Ultron. I'm so blanking. I am so sorry, guys. But anyways, Black Panther is fantastic. I can't wait to see the solo film, and I can't wait to see what they do with this character, because they beautifully set him up in this film. Let's hope for the best for Black Panther. Let me take a sip of the drink real fast because my throat's starting to hurt a little bit. Next up, we're going to talk about the big scene, which is the airport scene. Okay, next up, the airport scene. This is, my gosh, this is one of the best fighting sequences, the best fight moments I've ever seen in a film. One of the best, scenes ever. It is just beautifully done. Not only as a comic book movie action scene, but as a action scene in general. There are so many things going on. And what I really love about this scene, on top of the fact that it's just so damn good, and it's long, but it doesn't feel long because you're just engaged with the whole action scene, is that it starts off just kind of like setup. It's kind of like a pre-fight, Captain America comes out by himself because he knows what's about to happen. Tony Stark, and then Rhodey drop down, and then Black Panther shows up, and then Black Widow, and then Spider-Man shows up, taking the shield, which we've seen in the trailer. And then you see these kind of fights going on a little bit. And then eventually, these mini fights that are going on, which are pretty crazy, but it's kind of building up a little bit. Then it gets to the part where they're both on each side. Vision stops all of them on Team Cap's side, and they all land, and then they start walking towards each other, and they start running at each other. We've seen it in the trailer. The trailer with Spider-Man reveal right before the title of the film. When they crash, and when that fighting goes on, and you see these characters just going at each other, you felt the intensity, you felt the emotion with these characters, because basically building up to this fight in this film is great. If they would have started off the film like 20-30 minutes in, then this big fight scene happens, it wouldn't have been emotionally impactful for us as an audience member, because they really didn't set up a lot of the characters. But what they did was the opposite of that. They beautifully set up with these dialogue moments, these dialogue scenes, these emotional dramatic scenes with the Avengers on both sides, and showing why they believe what they believe, and how they feel, and how it ultimately comes to a head when this airport scene goes down. Because this fight scene could have been just a bunch of explosions, a bunch of people hitting each other and fighting each other, and there's no real emotion to it, and you really don't care, and you're not on the edge of your seat. But it's all of that. You feel the emotion. You are on the edge of your seat. You are loving this humongous fight sequence. Realistically, guys, this is the only time this is ever going to happen. This is the only time you're ever going to see all of these Avengers fighting each other. So essentially, they found every possible way for every possible character to fight each other. You got to see Ant-Man go inside Iron Man's suit. You got to see Spider-Man go against the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You got to see Captain America versus Spider-Man. You got to see Black Widow fight Ant-Man. You get to see Scarlet Witch going after Black Panther for a bit. You get to see the Vision fly through Giant Man, which was kind of weird. Vision wasn't really in the fight too much, and I feel like the reason why he wasn't really in the fight as much as I would like him to be is because he feels that I don't think he felt like he had a real emotion to be in this fight because he's an android. He's not really human. But you get to see towards the end of the fight, which I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but you got to see where he, even though he was on the opposite side of Scarlet Witch, he still emotionally cares for Scarlet Witch. He's still there for her, and so I felt like that. Seeing that interaction for to seeing that moment in the film in that scene, that Vision didn't have a real purpose to fight in the film. He did some stuff, but he really didn't have a humongous emotion to be involved in this fight. You get to see Hawkman, I almost said Hawkman, Hawkeye, excuse me, versus Black Panther. A lot of great moments. And then Ant-Man, as a distraction, turns into Giant Man. This was an amazing thing. Now, the unfortunate thing is that the Legos kind of ruined this moment because the Lego pieces that were coming out for this film, they kept showing Giant Man. I'm thinking, oh man, they're gonna do Giant Man. It's gonna be awesome, but I really wish they wouldn't show it in the Lego pieces. And I also do have to mention that while I was looking at non-spoiler reviews, which they were supposed to be non-spoiler, but this douchebag decided to put it in his written review, that Spider-Man fought Giant Man in this film. I was like, really? I was reading the review, never did it once say before this popped up that this was a spoiler review for the film. I was like, really? Maybe the guy felt that the Lego pieces that revealed Giant Man was like, okay, well, they already kind of revealed that he's going to be in the film, so I can say it in my review, and people will be like, oh, okay, well, I get it. Not everybody saw the Lego pieces that showed Giant Man. Not everybody. I'm telling you, probably the majority of audiences probably didn't know the Lego pieces had Giant Man in them, or at least it was just a promotional thing. They would never actually do it, and then they do it. Oh my gosh, it is phenomenal. He moves slow like he's supposed to, and what is so beautiful about this scene, about this particular moment in this scene, is the way how he is defeated. Is that Spider-Man references, did you all see that old movie, Empire Strikes Back? And he goes the whole AT route where he gets his webbing and starts spinning around his legs and locking them together with his web. And then Iron Man and War Machine come up and punch Giant Man, not Ant-Man, Giant Man in the face. And he falls down and it goes back to normal size. But seeing Giant Man in this film is phenomenal. They could have easily held this off until the Ant-Man and the Wasp film, the Ant-Man sequel featuring the Wasp, obviously by the title. But I felt like that, hey, once again, like I was saying a little bit earlier, this is the only time, realistically, you're ever going to see Avenger versus Avenger. So what do you all want to see? Spider-Man? We got it. We got Ant-Man. How about Giant Man? Let's do Giant Man. And they did Giant Man. They really did. The final thing that happened in this scene that I think stands out amongst the ton of action that is just beautifully done. I mean, it's just remarkable. I mean, it's so hard to really get into a lot of detail because there's so many great moments going on in this fight. But what really stood out to me, they showed it in the trailer, and I was like, well, there's no way that this is going to actually have a big, humongous outcome because that they show it in the trailer, is that Rhodey, War Machine, gets hit by a blast, and it turns out to be Vision's blast, but he is supposed to go after Falcon. Falcon dodges, and the blast hits War Machine, and Falcon actually is going to try to help and save War Machine, and then you see Tony Stark, either side, they're going down trying to they're going to try to grab Rhodey before he hits the ground, and War Machine slams into that ground hard, and then pull off the mask. He's bloody on his nose, and a little bit later in the film, you get to learn that he is not dead, but he is some sort of paralysis, essentially, where he's badly injured from this. And then you get to learn from that Vision was distracted, which is something that Tony Stark never believed would ever happen. So it was a very, very sad conclusion because we saw it in the trailer, just to see it again, to see the impact that when he hits the ground. It's just brutal, and it shows that, this has serious outcomes. But man, that airport scene, guys, is beautiful. It is so good, guys. I love it so much. It is so good. And I'm hoping to go see the film again tomorrow because I want to experience this film again. So I'm hoping I get to do that. So let's hope for the best there. So airport scene, phenomenal. Fantastic. Love it to death. Okay, next thing I do want to talk about is Tony Stark's parents. Now, we've seen a little bit about Tony Stark's parents. We've learned a little bit about his dad through the Iron Man films. Um, and I felt like in this film that they could have easily just held this off. They could have, said, okay, well, we'll learn more about his parents in Iron Man 4 if they ever do it. But what they did beautifully in this film is that they show a young 20-year-old ish Tony Stark when they did like this great, de-aging thing where they did the same de-aging for Michael Douglas when he was in Ant-Man, and then they did not de-aging but aging, like significant aging for Agent Carter in The Winter Soldier. Um, so they de-age Robert Downey Jr. for this particular moment that happens in the film, and you get to see his parents, his mom, which I don't think we've seen his mom before. And we got to see his dad, played again by John Slattery. I think that's how you say his name. Probably butchered it, but he played Tony Stark, not Tony Stark, but Tony Stark's father in Iron Man 2, and I think he played it in Iron Man 3 as well. I know he reprised his role in Ant-Man in that flashback scene with a younger Michael Douglas, Hank Pym. That was a cool thing there. But seeing them again, and it turns out it's Tony Stark's technology where he gets to relive this. He gets to relive and kind of see this moment of his final, his final moment, his final interaction between his two parents before they were ultimately, killed, which we get to learn a little bit about later in the film, which I'll talk about in a second. Um, so it was really interesting to see this moment because it's awesome technology. I'm like, where is this going to lead exactly? Because we've not really learned a ton about his parents. I mean, we've learned a little bit about his dad, like I've been saying, but his mom not so much, and we get to learn about a little bit of their interaction between him and his mom and him and his dad. So that was kind of interesting. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because the big reveal that Helmut Zemo finally gets to do in this film is the reveal. Now, we get to see this scene, but we don't get to see who's in the car, where at the beginning of the film, we see Winter Soldier take out a vehicle and goes in the back of the trunk and grabs something out of this case. Looks like some kind of blue thing, which I'm assuming it's all related to the other Winter Soldiers that they created, which is a whole thing going on. I'm like, I didn't know there were other Winter Soldiers. It blew my mind. So we get to see this scene a couple times, and finally we get to the moment where Tony Stark, Captain America, and the Winter Soldier and Helmut Zemo in like this huge like fortified room, and they reveal on this footage that the beginning of the film we get to see that car crash that Winter Soldier causes, and then we get to see Winter Soldier, like not as Bucky, but as the Winter Soldier, being a soldier, being controlled by Hydra, kills Tony Stark's dad by punching him in the face a bunch. And even though they don't show him choking her out, he chokes out Tony Stark's mom. And this is the turning point for Tony Stark, who says, yes, Helmut Zemo caused everything. Bucky, you weren't the one. You were being how do you want to call it? Framed. Yeah, that's the word. And that's the flip. The flip. Tony Stark, even though he understands Bucky, Winter Soldier was under Hydra's control at the time, Tony Stark still wants to kill Bucky. And that's where everything goes downhill. You get to see Tony Stark as a character, his emotional level exceeds everything. He is just on a warpath to kill Bucky. And that's why Iron Man and Captain America have to fight again and be on the opposite sides. Iron Man wants to kill Bucky. Captain America wants to protect his friend. And what's even worse, Captain America knew that Tony's parents were killed, but he claims he didn't know that the Winter Soldier did it. But he knew that his parents were killed in some event. He just didn't know who killed them. So realistically, Tony Stark, if that's to be believed, Tony Stark and Captain America learned at the same exact time that Winter Soldier killed Tony's parents. And I think this was a great reveal of why the fighting has to happen again. And I feel like Tony did get some sort of revenge because Winter Soldier's metal arm was shot off by Iron Man. And Iron Man was trying to kill Bucky. He could have easily killed Bucky. Captain America could have killed Iron Man, but he didn't. But I feel like that Tony Stark's arc in this film alone, not just talking about Iron Man 1 to now, but in this film alone is magnificent. You get to see his face after he's been told that in Sokovia during Age of Ultron, my son was there to help, build build houses and build communities for the Sokovians, and he was killed while you were fighting Ultron. He was killed when you were there. When you Avengers were saving the world, you killed my son. And the look on his face is just utter disgust. He is so upset and mad at himself. And then to see where he gets to go through this emotional range of so many different things in this film that's involved with the plot, and you get to see that he gets mad, he gets sad, he has some quirky moments and funny moments, as Tony Stark will. But it's that final few scenes where he's accepting Captain America again. I'm on your side. He wants to kill Bucky. There's a line he says, "He killed my mom." It's just so brutal, and the way Robert Downey Jr. portrays it, it's fantastic. It's so good. Man, it was like a shocking moment. I'm like, oh my god, are you kidding me? No, why did Bucky do that? The audio went pretty loud there, but a great reveal. The Russo Brothers, phenomenal job. Just phenomenal. I love the reveal. I love the fact that he did it. I love the fact that Bucky did it, because now there was a reason for Tony Stark to flip again. So, man, gotta give them props. I'm glad they gave some more insight into Tony Stark's parents. We really didn't know a lot about them. So, there you have it. Next thing I do want to talk about is Vision and Scarlet Witch for a couple of minutes, for a little bit. So, they teased it a little bit in Age of Ultron when they were saying, we're bringing in Vision and Scarlet Witch in Age of Ultron. In the comics, Vision and Scarlet Witch are lovers. They get married. They have kids. I don't know how that's going to work in the live-action cinematic universe if they go down that route. And they went a little bit further in this film. In Age of Ultron, they had a moment where Vision saves Scarlet Witch from Sokovia falling, essentially, and she looks at him for a little bit, like there's like a little moment. I'm like, And in this film, they take it even further, where Vision is trying to have a conversation with Scarlet Witch and trying to say that, I see the good in you and all this kind of stuff. He's just trying to connect with her and try to, I guess, emotionally try to see if he can be emotional with her. I mean, it's kind of odd because he's an android. He's not human, so he's coming off kind of weird in some moments, but he's also being very understanding, and I think she sees that. So even though they were on opposite sides in this film, I think that they're setting up a maybe beautiful relationship for Infinity War, or possibly a Scarlet Witch and Vision film. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but I felt like in this film they could have easily just kept them separate and never tease any possible relationship down the road in the MCU, but they really did give some significant moments to where it could possibly go that direction. But I think that Marvel is just kind of playing around with what they could do, and it works in the comics, but will it work on screen? So I feel like that maybe the Russo brothers and Marvel was thinking, okay, well, maybe we can kind of give some little bit of hints and stuff like that for this possible relationship between these two characters, and we'll see where it goes. So who knows what they're going to do, but I do like that they gave some moments for these characters. So I'm going to take a sip of the drink. My throat's hurting once again, and I'll be right back. Okay. Next thing I do want to cover for a little bit here, is the Raft. Now, they showed the Raft in a trailer, this humongous prison that comes out of the ocean. Tony Stark lands on it, and I was wondering, why is the Raft there? And at first, when they introduced the Raft in the film, and Tony Stark lands on there in a helicopter, I was thinking, are we going to see some villains that were not killed? Are we going to see some potential, little cameos of characters maybe we haven't seen or we have seen? Are we going to see Abomination? Because we have Thunderbolt Ross, and he's there at the Raft. Turns out this is where they're holding the Avengers that were captured, that were on Cap's side, which was Ant-Man, Scarlet Witch. We got to see Hawkeye, and we got to see Falcon in the Raft. And I'm thinking the reason why they're in the Raft is because they could easily probably break out of any, a typical prison, a jail cell, and especially for Scarlet Witch, and she has some kind of collar on her neck, which I guess negates her abilities. I'm not really sure, but the fact that they're held in this prison that's been in the comics, the Raft, is very intriguing, and now I kind of understand why they have it in the film, because, like I said, these are Avengers. These people could get out easily of any, typical prison, so they have to be in a very high secure prison. It makes a lot of sense. And we got to see towards the end of the film, which is where Captain America essentially saves everybody and breaks them out of the Raft prison, which is pretty cool. But to see the Raft being used for a logical reason for these Avengers that, in the government's eyes, broke the law and they're against the law and they're criminals. So it makes sense they brought this in the mix for them to be there. So I like that aspect, and I like the fact that they could have easily just had Tony Stark there and see the other Avengers, but they had Thunderbolt Ross there as well to kind of give some more dialogue, because I love seeing Thunderbolt Ross. I'm glad they brought him back for a little bit in this film, so I'm glad about that. Next thing I do want to talk about is the mid-credits scene in this film, which is Bucky in Wakanda being refrozen for the sake of the fact that his mind can still be corrupted by Hydra, and they were shown that in the film. They show that with Helmut Zemo, who was pretending to be the psychiatric doctor or whatever, used the book that used to control Winter Soldier and used it again on Bucky, and it was pretty insane, but he used it again. So it clearly showed in this film that he can be mind controlled by anybody who gets a hold of this book that has these particular words said in order that will trigger the Winter Soldier in Bucky's head. So he's in Wakanda and being refrozen. You get to see Captain America there. And the reason why, at first I didn't think it was Wakanda, but when he got himself frozen, then Black Panther walks up. T'Challa himself walks up. And there's a little bit of conversation because T'Challa says, if I can help one person be at peace, I will do it. And then Captain America says, someone will come after him. And T'Challa says, they will try. Then it pans out from the building. You see this beautiful rainforest type deal. And then you see it for a brief glimpse. The big Black Panther. Oh my God. It was beautiful. I loved it so much. It was awesome. And what I was mentioning earlier about Black Panther before, when I was talking about him earlier in the podcast, is that the arc this character goes through in this film is a lot, because not only did he spare the life of the man who actually killed his father, even though that he knows that Bucky the Winter Soldier is not guilty, but even though he was going after Bucky for a lot of the film for the death of his father, that he's like, yes, I could help him, and I will help him. I will refreeze him, and we will find a way to get this thing in his brain out that will basically stop him from being controlled by this book that has these particular words that Hydra used to control him and to turn him into the Winter Soldier. So I like the fact that they've kind of introduced that. So maybe in the Black Panther solo film, that what they're setting up is that, I don't know if Captain America is going to show up, but I think Bucky is going to be appearing in the film, because maybe they'll unfreeze him in the film, maybe not, but maybe he'll be shown in a cryogenic tube, and when he was refrozen. Maybe they'll have Helmut Zemo, because he was the actual killer of his father. But I think that this sets up the fact that we're going to be in Wakanda a lot in the Black Panther solo film. It makes sense. It's his solo film, and I like the scene. It kind of just builds a possible relationship, and I think it's going to work out for the best. Captain America, Black Panther on the same side, because look, Infinity War's coming. Thanos is coming. We gotta be prepared for this stuff. And I think that with them setting this up to where Black Panther is probably going to be on Iron Man's side and Captain America's side, where, he doesn't have any beef with any of them, that's going to work out for the best, because we're going to need Black Panther. When we go against Thanos, we're going to need him. We're going to need everybody we can possibly get for this film. So I'm glad that they showed this little spot. And like I said, the big Black Panther, freaking amazing. I loved it so much. It's freaking awesome. The post-credits scene, which I didn't know what it was going to be. I honestly thought the post-credit scene was going to be something Thanos-related, maybe, because, this beginning of phase 3, and I'm thinking, okay, well, they had a mid-credit scene for Age of Ultron showing Thanos get the gauntlet. But maybe they're going to show Thanos again, maybe building an army, or, setting some more pieces up for what he's going to be doing, in Infinity War Part 1 and 2. But that wasn't the case at all. It was Spider-Man. Tom Holland once again. Aunt May comes in and help and gives him an ice packet or whatever to put on his eye because he fought a pretty big man, which was Giant Man. I'm gonna say Ant-Man. And what's really cool is that on his wrist, a part of his new suit is on the ceiling, and it pans up, and the camera shows Spider-Man logo, and then it says on the screen, Spider-Man will return, and everybody freaked out, like, yes, Spider-Man. And so it was pretty cool that Tony Stark gave Peter Parker, Spider-Man, his own symbol, which was pretty badass, I gotta say. So I'm glad that they did that because they could have easily just had another Thanos scene, but they had Spider-Man because, like, look, we finally got Spider-Man in her film. Let's have him as a post-credit scene. I mean, his film's coming out next year, around, I think, summer of 2017. So it's a year and a couple months away, but it's coming. It's coming pretty fast. So, I mean, it makes sense after seeing the film why they would have him as the post-credit scene, or at least one of the credit scenes. So I'm glad that they did that because it was pretty awesome. And to see the symbol, I mean, it's just classic Spider-Man symbol. It was pretty badass. So, gotta give them credit. I really enjoyed the post-credit scene. Next thing I do want to talk about here is no one died in this film. I was shocked. I honestly felt, and I've been theorizing ever since the announcement of this film, and especially after who they announced was going to be in this film, someone's going to die. Someone is going to die in this film. Now, I didn't think it was going to be Captain America because that's the easiest way to go. Because in the comic books, the comic book version of this story, Captain America dies. Now, the rumor is that Captain America isn't going to die. It's going to be Iron Man. They're going to flip it. Iron Man's going to die. They're going to get rid of him. But then again, it's like, wait a minute. They're going to kill Tony Stark in Captain America film? Like, they're going to do that? I didn't believe that theory for one bit. Now, for the past couple weeks, I've been kidding with my friends online and, at work and all that kind of stuff. And, just talking to people in general about the film, that I felt like Black Widow or Hawkeye could die, because we've had Hawkeye for a couple of films. People thought that he was going to die in Age of Ultron, and Quicksilver took the bullet, literally, for Hawkeye. Excuse me. And Black Widow has been in a lot of films. She's been in Iron Man 2. She was in The Avengers. She was in Winter Soldier. And she was in Age of Ultron. And this is her 5th film, so I was thinking, well, Black Widow is a very popular character. I almost said Black Panther again. Black Widow, Black Panther, blah, 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 blah. Black Widow's been in a lot of films. This is her 5th film. It would make sense that maybe she wouldn't last on Infinity War. Maybe she wouldn't work in Infinity War because, she's just an agent. A pretty badass agent, don't get me wrong. But she doesn't have any superpowers. She can't fly. She doesn't have all these crazy abilities. She's just a really good fighter. So maybe it wouldn't work out if she went and fought Thanos. So maybe Black Widow would die in the film, huge catastrophe, a huge thing, and then they would be able to build more character with losing a fallen Avenger through this whole battle. And maybe it would work out for the best that them losing somebody permanently would bring them closer together, but maybe not. Excuse me again, my throat is losing it. Let me take a sip of the drink real fast. My God. My throat's not wanting to hold up with this long podcast. So I think that with no one dying, this tells me, with no one dying in this film, that there's going to be a lot of casualties in Infinity War. That's what I think is going to happen. I think that with what happened in this film, with Rhodey getting paralyzed, yes, and other Avengers getting hurt, well, some sort of paralysis. He's not fully paralyzed. He was walking in the film. With some help, obviously, but I think that with no casualties in this film, that's setting up to where Infinity War, both parts, maybe it's going to be part 2 where a lot of people die, but part 1 maybe lose a couple people, not going to be good, because I think that with people with their final contracts for these Avenger films with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that we're going to lose a couple people. I don't know who we're going to lose, but I can guarantee we're going to be losing a couple people in these Avenger films, because Civil War, I mean, yes, they could have easily killed off somebody, but the fact that they didn't was shocking to me. But I think that Infinity War is going to be a whole different story, because it's going to be more insane. This is the culmination of everything, the culmination of Phase 1, Phase 2, and then when we get through most of Phase 3, by the time Infinity War Part 2 is done, we're going to be mostly done with Phase 3. We're going to have a couple more films in Phase 3, but essentially Phase 3 is going to be this is going to be the culmination of everything. So I'm expecting tons and tons and tons of Avengers and side characters, plus maybe Netflix characters, maybe Agents of Shield characters. I mean, I would prefer to have Netflix characters over Agents of Shield characters, simply because I'm more invested with the Netflix characters. Because after a certain bit in season 1 of Agents of Shield, I gave up on the show. I stopped caring. But I think that it'd be awesome if Jessica Jones, Luke Cage would pop up, maybe the Punisher. It'd be pretty badass. Daredevil, I mean, I don't know what he would do, but I mean, it would just be amazing to have just some of these Netflix characters and find Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. characters pop up in Infinity War Part 1 or 2. But we'll see what happens, because I think when they finally reveal who's all in Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2, we'll get more of a sense of who could possibly die in that film. But the fact that no one died here, it's awesome for us as fans. We get to see these characters possibly pop up in more solo films before Infinity War, and in Infinity War if they don't pop up anything else until Infinity War. But we'll see what happens in Infinity War. But surprised, no one hit, no one took a bullet. No one took a bullet like Quicksilver. No one died in the film. Surprised. So, next thing I do want to talk about for the final thoughts, the Russo Brothers. Now, I talked about this briefly in my non-spoiler review. The reason why I'm talking about these guys is because they have done a phenomenal job so far in the MCU. They've done Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which is, to a lot of people, one of the best Marvel Cinematic Universe films ever done so far. And now they've done Civil War, and people are saying that this is, again, another one of the best Marvel Cinematic Universe films to date. And even some people are saying this is the greatest Marvel Cinematic Universe film to date. And that might be a little too much. I can't personally say yes or no, because I need to see the film a couple more times before I personally can say yes, it's one of the best, or I can definitely say it's one of the best Marvel Cinematic Universe films ever made. I can't say that it's the best Marvel Cinematic Universe film ever made, because I have to see it a couple more times before I can finally verify that. But the fact that everybody's having the discussion about the Winter Soldier and also Civil War, both done by the Russo Brothers, is great news for Infinity War Part 1 and 2, which they both are directing both parts. Because let's say that we all know the Winter Soldier is amazing, but let's say hypothetically Civil War, not so much. Not that good. Then we might get a little worried, like, oh boy, this isn't good. Winter Soldier was amazing, and Civil War was good, but it wasn't as good. It wasn't better. I mean, it's not on par with Winter Soldier. Then we would have a little bit of worrisome, and what are they going to do to Infinity War Part 1 and 2? But they did a phenomenal job of Civil War. Did a fantastic job with this film. They've shown that they can do a centralized story on just one specific character, Captain America, and they've shown how they can do not only a film with multiple characters, team versus team, but also show more of the main focus on Captain America once again. So the fact that they're able to balance a lot of these characters in Civil War makes me hopeful and very excited, and the hype is real for Infinity War Part 1 and 2 Avengers, because these guys have been just knocking out of the park so far. So let's hope that streak continues, because what they were able to do with the mixing of dramatic and emotional scenes, funny moments, action scenes, gets me really excited for what they're going to be able to bring to the big screen in Infinity War Part 1 and 2, because those films, Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2, these type of films have never happened. Culmination films, cinematic universes where everything's connected, is a new concept. It's still technically a new concept. And the fact that these two films are going to be the culmination of everything is just mind-blowing. It's never been done. So how they're going to be able to do this, I'm not really sure. But I will tell you this. After seeing both films they've done so far in the MCU, I'm going to give them my full attention. I'm going to believe that they can do this, that they can actually pull this off. Let's hope for the best, guys. Let's hope for the best. My final thoughts. Last topic, guys. Captain America Civil War is a phenomenal film. A beautifully made film. This film could have easily failed by just one thing. One thing could have ruined this film. One character could have ruined this film. And that's not the case. Nothing to me personally failed in this film. You know, I felt like everything worked. All the story elements they're bringing into place, whether it's a particular character's agenda, whether it's an actual main plot, whether it's the villain, in my personal opinion, Helmut Zemo, whether it's the introduction of Spider-Man or Black Panther, whether it's many things that was thrown into this film, and it all combines into Captain America Civil War and makes it what the film is. This film could have failed. They could have had that airport scene too early in the film. They could have had that airport scene at the very end of the film, and I think we'd still enjoy it, but it's a lot of build up and not a lot of execution at the end, but too much build up. It was just they were dragging it on for too long. They could have done that. They could have made it to where Black Panther wasn't that appealing. They could have made it to where Spider-Man wasn't that good. They could have made it to where, even though it's a Captain America movie, Tony Stark got more screen time and he was more of a prominent role in this film than even Captain America. They could have easily made it to where Bucky wasn't that. Bucky wasn't, wasn't. We really didn't care about the character that much. Trying to figure out what the words are. What are the words, man? Tell me. They could have made it to where Bucky is just not that appealing to us as an audience, to where we actually emotionally care about him and we feel for him when he, is trying his best to change everything and try to stop being this Winter Soldier. He wants just to be Bucky again. And they could have easily screwed up a lot of things. But everything worked. Captain America Civil War, to me, I'll say it again, one of the best Marvel films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe ever done. It just blows my mind. That action sequence, the great funny moments, overall just a phenomenal film. And it perfectly, to me, closes up and finishes the Captain America trilogy in a great way. This film could have easily been Avengers Infinity War for, like, the culmination of Phase 3 could have been Avengers Infinity War. And then, or not Infinity War, Avengers Civil War. And then Phase 4 could have been Infinity War. But they decided to do that in a Captain America film. It makes sense for the character that Captain America will be heavily involved with this whole ordeal of the Sokovia Accords. So it makes sense. But overall, guys, phenomenal film. Love the film. Can't wait to see it again. I'm just blown away. I can't wait to see more. I can't wait to see where some of these characters go next after this film, after what happens, because so many great things happen and so many emotional things happen. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Phase 3 is coming. It's coming hard. So there you have it, guys. That's my spoiler review / discussion for Captain America Civil War. Thank you so much for listening. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought about this film. Let me know particular things you liked about the film, maybe things you didn't like, things that you loved, things you wanted to see more of. Anything of your thoughts, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for listening. Peace out.